contradictions in this most famous of gospel stories have baffled historians for generations.
Trying to piece together a portrait of the historical Jesus has bamboozled scholars for a good 200 years. There are certain things that scholars agree on in terms of the basic facts of his life, and then there is room for a great deal of argument and speculation.
These books are traditionally ascribed to followers of Jesus from his own day, but scholars have recognized for a long time that in fact they were probably not written by Jesus' own followers, who were Aramaic-speaking peasants from Galilee. These Gospels are written in Greek by highly educated people, probably living decades after Jesus, so they're not eyewitness accounts.
Many Christians believe the Gospels are the literal word of God and must therefore be true. For historians, they're a valuable source, evidence to be checked, corroborated, and even challenged.
One of the most difficult tasks that New Testament scholars have is deciding what in the stories found in the Gospels is historical and what is legendary. Once you make that separation, you're able to see what the historical Jesus was really like, but you're also able to see how storytellers wanted to present Jesus to their audiences.
What many people don't realize about the Gospels is they're not contemporary eyewitness accounts of what happened. And lots of people have thought that they were.
They are anonymous writings. We don't know who Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John happen to be.
But as we study them more, we realize, first of all, they're written 40, 50, 60, 70 years after Jesus.
And the story they all describe is carefully crafted.
You think of the Gospels as you would a politician trying to persuade you of a particular way of seeing things. They involve a lot of choice in terms of what goes into them and what gets left out, but they're very much designed as recruitment literature. And if you've got recruitment literature, you've got to be careful you don't alienate people.
And the one group the gospel writers had to be very careful not to offend were the Romans.
In an environment where there are serious consequences for being a Christian, that you could be hauled in front of Roman authorities and all sorts of terrible things would happen to you, you might want to be a bit careful about your portrayal of the Romans.
When Jesus is given the news of John the Baptist's death, his mission takes on a new urgency.
We're told in the Gospels that the word is taken to Jesus. He gets the horrible news. This is his relative, the person he's worked with, and now he's dead. Now everything falls on the shoulders of Jesus. He essentially is thinking, is it up to me now to take over this movement? Remember, there's a singular movement. I would call it a messianic political movement of revolution. Who's now going to be in charge? It's very clear he realizes, I now will have to do what John was doing. And he begins to accelerate his ministry. I think he really believes, more than ever, the time is at hand. He thinks the kingdom is near, the end is near, and that he's chosen by God to be the Messiah, basically the ruler of the world.
A very challenging figure who was very courageous and willing to die for what he believed in.
He expected for God to vindicate him with his legions of angels and to exalt him even if he had to suffer. And it didn't happen.
For almost 2,000 years, the story of the last days of Jesus has been celebrated by Christians the world over.
This is the fundamental thing. Jesus has to die.
But could there be more to this story than meets the eye?
Judas!
A plot twist that sheds an extraordinary new light on Jesus' final days.
The story of the last days of Jesus, as portrayed in the Gospels, does not make sense.
Herod Antipas, he wanted to become king of the Jews.
And Jesus,
I see Jesus as enormously revolutionary.
Schweitzer published what we call The Quest for the Historical Jesus. In German, it was called Von Reimarus, who's the first quester, to Reda, where he stops. And so what Schweitzer's, I dedicate it to Albert Schweitzer. So what does he do? It's absolutely brilliant. He says, and Dom Crossan does this too, John Dominic Crossan and others, these are interim ethics. They're interim ethics. And yes, they're radical as hell, and they will get you killed. It means that you throw yourself, as Schweitzer put it, on the wheel of history to try to move it forward in God's way, bring the kingdom. What is the kingdom? The will of God being done on earth as it is in heaven. So you throw yourself, and this is the last page of Schweitzer. God, it almost makes me cry to think of it. He said, Jesus threw himself on the wheel of history, and it lunged back and crushed him. And he basically says, are you willing to take up those interim ethics?